What's up, guys? It's Emperor John Kill 3D Gaming with another video, and it's been a while since I've done a topics related video, and this question was asked to me. It was sent to me on Twitter in my messages, and I've been thinking about how do I approach this particular topic without making it seem like I'm siding with one over the other, or how do I stay on the fence with this. It's about reviews, fandoms, and the products. For example, let's say what has come out today, Godzilla vs. King Kong. Most people go into it knowing what it is. Most people just know that fans of kaiju films know what they're expecting, and they would know what a kaiju film needs to be to entertain them and what's to make a kaiju film. Then you have outside critics, which 9 times out of 10 critics are failing because they're being brought into, let's say, I can't expect to bring someone into Resident Evil 5, for example, without them playing all the Resident Evils to know what a Resident Evil game is supposed to be. You would have somebody come in saying, well, I don't like the game, and I'm going to give it a bad review just off that one experience. Take a fan and a non-fan of something like Resident Evil. Whose word, for example, would you trust more? Would you trust the word of a critic that's only maybe played that one title, which wasn't a good impression? Even I can be honest, RE5 is not a good impression for anybody to jump into the series. Or whose word are you going to trust more? The word of somebody who has also played every single game in the franchise, or at least a good amount of the games in the franchise, and that person would know the ins, the outs, the ups, the downs, the mechanics, the lore, and everything in between. But if you do that, if you would trust that person over a critic, you're called bias, or you would be claimed to have a biased opinion, and that your opinion should not count or be taken into any kind of consideration. There's a lot of ups and downs and hiccups with that kind of topic and with that kind of mindset, because it seems as of recently critics and fans have always had a divide, and it's showing that more and more critics are always full of shit. Critics don't know how to review video games, they don't know how to review films or TV shows that doesn't meet with their agenda, or basically sucking the tits of whatever studio so they can continue to gain access. Like, if you go into a kaiju film, like, because I want to use I want to use Godzilla vs. Kong as a recent for basically the baseline of this, because I haven't seen the film yet. But as a person who has watched kaiju films, I want to use this for example. If you go into a kaiju film, are you going into it for the story? Are you going into it for the human characters? Are you going into it expecting to win an Academy Award or to blow your mind away? Well, my friend, if you're going into looking for any of those in a kaiju film, you're fucking stupid. You're fucking retarded. You need to revoke your fucking credit card, because how is it that you're going to go into something that you know is not going to be story related? See, Kong vs. Godzilla is more of exposing critics. It's more to expose people who think they know better than fans, that know better than people of a particular genre. Like when it comes to Star Wars, am I going to trust a critic, or am I going to trust fans of the franchise? If me and somebody else made a review on something, and they're an outsider to it, so they're just going to bash it and complain about it, but I would be, let's say, a longtime fan of Mortal Kombat, whose word are you going to take most on Mortal Kombat? Are you going to take the word of an outsider, or are you going to take the word of a person who's been part of the franchise? Now, that's the part that I know would be struggling for most people. How can you say something or give an opinion or give a viewpoint without being either seen as a critic idiot or a biased fan? And someone said, oh, no matter what, it cannot work. Actually, yes, it can. There are fans out there. Yes, I understand. There are fans that will just say anything and anything to support their brand, a la the PlayStation Legion, Xbox fanboys, PC elitists, anything to support their brand, for example. Like people like those. But then you have people who are fans. I'm going to understand, not fanboys, but fans, who can tell you what is wrong. Like, they'll be like, yes, I can admit that this game might be particular to me, but it may not be particular to this person. So I'm not going to attack or chastise them for their opinion, because I know that they're an outsider to it. They don't know much of it, and they're being maybe only given an example, or even a poor example of something. Like, many people was trying to get into Final Fantasy at one point. I got lucky and got in by Final Fantasy X. Then the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy came out, and everybody said that yes, you cannot, even fans said, yeah, that is a poor representation for you to come in. And yes, it can be criticized, but critics should not use that game to base around the whole series. Because I remember a lot of people say, oh, the Final Fantasy series sucks. Well, why? Because 13.2 and all that sucked ass. Well, you do realize that the numbers on the Final Fantasy games are really, like, the numbers are just to number how many games there have been, but every story is different, every story is separate, rarely interconnecting unless you have the Dissidia franchise, which interconnects everything, like the DC films. The fans of the Snyder Cut love the Snyder Cut, but then you still have outsiders saying, oh, it's the same film, nothing's changed, when actually there is a significant difference in the Snyder Cut, which can be proven and shows and proves the critics wrong. So it's just like there's a disconnect. There will always be a disconnect between fans, critics, and people caught in between on who they should listen to. Now, me personally, when it comes to, like, say, Star Wars, you have all the YouTube channels of Star Wars. Only a select few have remained positive and remained true to the fandom, while the rest of them just basically became the very thing they swore to destroy, a la every member of the Fandom Menace. And I'm glad to see that some people who have actually seen my video on the Fandom Menace, they come to me in my live streams whenever I'm playing Star Wars games. They come to me and actually ask me on the lore, and they know that I'm not going to lie to them on the lore. Like, when it came to Star Wars, that's the one thing I can say no one can ever call me a liar about, even no matter how much you try, is Star Wars. Because I dived all into Legends growing up, dived all into canon, non-canon, watched everything. So whose word would you take the most? Would you take the word of Doomcock, who just basically has to clickbait every video he makes, a la also Mike Zera? Or are you going to trust someone like me, or someone who's even bigger, like Star Wars Theory, who's, without even having to he doesn't have to sugarcoat what he says, for example, but he'll tell you the truth, but he will also tell you to remain optimistic and stay mindful of things, unlike Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, who bitches and complains and bashes everything, because we all know that sweet ad revenue is what is important, not the fandom. So there are a lot of people that will be caught in the middle of something like this, and that disconnect always shows. That disconnect, for one, like Marvel and DC. Sometimes when people say a DC movie is bad and someone actually watches it and analyzes it, yeah, it might have its hiccups, but a DC film is actually not as bad as what a critic would say. I would take more of the word of the fan over the critic. Now, it makes me wonder, what should you do as a consumer of a product, or a fan, or a newcomer to something? And you got people that they'll come into a, like, say, a game series or a film series late, love it, and then want to go back and look up everything that it was a part that could be part of that franchise. That's what happened to me when I was young, when I got into the Evil Dead franchise. I started with Army of Darkness. I didn't know that it was part of 2 other films and 2 PS2 games at the time. What did I do? Ended up getting the trilogy and 2 PS2 games, Fistful of Boomstick and Regeneration. So there'll always be a positive outlook to latecomers and newcomers, because a lot of people tell me, oh, you like the Evil Dead, because the Evil Dead is very niche. It is not for everybody, okay? But then I used to have people in school tell me, oh, you like Evil Dead, that's trash. And I was like, yeah, it says you, because you don't watch it and you don't understand what it is or what it's trying to be. When it comes to monster films, like Like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, and all those movies, for example. Are you going to take the words of the critics, or are you going to take the words of the fans? And in that case, I would say take the word of the fan over the critic, because you can always tell when you're doing something artificially and not making a review, but more of a hit piece, just to, okay, let me take this particular thing down and I'll get cred. You know, it's like, why is it more effective to lie to people than it is to be honest with them? Because unfortunately, in today's society, YouTube critics, either film critics or some TV critics, some would do better off just lying and misrepresenting things just so they can get their sweet revenue in, but then honesty doesn't get nowhere. And didn't we always get taught when we were growing up that honesty would always set you free? When it comes to every one of my reviews and every one of my topics that I've done, for example, none of them have been filled with lies. I've never been called out for them, except for past events, which people just have to let go at this point. I don't acknowledge it. They still do. So that just shows how trapped in the past some people can be over what has been done. But where would I tell you to do? Like, what would I say you should do? I would say you still should go into it with an open mind. But if you need help understanding a franchise, don't go to a critic. Go to a fan of a franchise. Like Dragon Ball. Not many people still have gotten into that. They say it's still a cartoon. Okay, if you call anime a cartoon, you're automatically disregarded. I'm just going to say that right now. But anybody that struggles to get into a fandom, and where my stance on this, I look at it both ways. Very few critics are right. If you're a newcomer to something, try it for yourself, dig into it, and if you don't understand a few things, then go to a fan. Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to get the more honesty from the fan of a franchise that would know something, know its ins and outs entirety. Okay? If I was getting into Final Fantasy now, I'm not going to go look at critics' reviews, because they'll just say anything. I'm going to go to a fan of that franchise who's going to guide me through everything. The same thing with God of War. A lot of people are getting into God of War because of God of War 2018. What are they doing? They're going back and playing all the God of War games. It's always a double-edged sword, and it always goes back and forth. But in my personal opinion, I think you should trust a fan's word over a critic's word, because you'll get more of an honest outlook. In fact, you will be shown and instructed through everything. So that's all we're going to say on the topic. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, favorite, do what you can, and I'll catch you next time.